my lip and keep on hands.
I'm gonna go ahead. So this is this week marks the 20th anniversary of Christopher and I going to look for Lama Pasan at Balkwang Temple. And I remember it because I had decided that I needed to find a Buddhist monk teacher before I turned 50. And my birthday's November 11th, so I was really running out of time. And so at the time I was thinking, like we all do, all of us are practicing because we find something out of whack in our lives, either emotionally or other mentally. Somehow or another, we're all drawn to a spiritual path in order to improve the quality of our day-to-day life. And for a Buddhist practitioner, the first step is to, and I've talked about this before once when we were doing the opening prayers, which is refuge. And the reason that it came to mind to mention it again today was circling back. Here, it's been 20 years since I went to the trouble to find a Tibetan monk. There was one teaching in San Antonio. And what I've noticed now, this morning when I was doing my meditation session, which involves all the Lamrim prayers and everything, I noticed that there is a level of not fully taking refuge in the sense of fully accepting and fully taking on board that these teachings, this philosophy, the ideas that we study and that Christopher is going to be covering today, that for them to have the greatest impact, we have to actually take them in. They have to get past, this is now I'm speaking specifically about myself, but I tend to be like everybody else. We have to the Dharma has to get past the gatekeepers of our psychological coping mechanism known as arrogance and self-confidence, and I already know, I know. So, we have this push and pull. We come to Buddhism because we're looking for a new way of seeing how things exist, including ourselves. What does it mean, and how do we improve the quality of our life? So we come to that with out of the desire to seek. But what I've seen in myself and others is that it can take many, many years to fully let go of the framework that got us, the framework that we have had since birth. And in Buddhist practice, we're talking about beginning this life. I'm not going to, Christopher's going to be covering all this in detail, that we've been talking about. But the main thing I wanted to share before we just say the refuge prayers is that, and I think anybody who's been practicing for very long will say, yeah, almost every time I really step back and look at my level of sincere willingness to change, which is another way of saying taking refuge, sincere willingness to change, I'm always surprised at how much more of that willingness there is still left to dig out, and that opening of the heart, and to really trust and have confidence in the process. As Brian Herman said, have confidence in the process. So for all of us, we live in a world, and this is why it's so difficult in part, we live in a world where the messaging and the paradigms are often almost the opposite of what the teachings are talking about with regard to impermanence and how things do actually exist. So I just wanted to talk about that partly very selfish because I'm commemorating my 20 years formally practicing Buddhism. And then thought my meditation this morning probably related to y'all. Okay, sermon is over. We'll do the prayers in English. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the positive potential I create by listening to teachings of the other paramitas. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha, for the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. For immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends, hatred for enemies. And then just holding those thoughts, think that as a Mahayana practitioner, you have signed up to be one of the causes leading sentient beings to these fortunate states. And so it falls on your shoulders as a aspiring Bodhisattva, Mahayana practitioner. It falls to you, again, to fully take refuge in the Dharma, to fully explore the extent of your capacity to transform, to become more and more Buddha-like, if you will, your capacity and your commitment. Because only as you experience your own transformation can you, with real confidence, even claim to have the capacity to, quote, lead others to these fortunate states of existence. So you see the important, vital relationship between your own refuge, your own willingness to take it on board, and your ability to actually be a Mahayana practitioner. I think that's enough. Christopher's going to give us some more how-to.
I'll just add to that refuge idea. We go for refuge until we are enlightened to the gurus, the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. May all wrong thoughts which hinder progress on our path to enlightenment cease and not generate further the mind streams of ourselves and others. May we easily develop in our mind streams every sort of correct thought which helps us progress on the path. May all external and internal hindrances to the path be completely pacified. Okay, so today we're...
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Could you please turn up the volume?
Turn up the volume? You mean you're not... Yeah, I was noticing this last week. I wonder if there's anything wrong with the connection.
Oh, it sounds better now. Thank you very much.
Does it sound better now?
Well, I could hear you. It's still difficult to hear Kobita.
She was a little further away from the mic, but the mic is supposed to be picking up everybody in the room.
Anyway,
yeah,
we'll be mindful of it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to hear everything you say. Thank you.
Okay, so I will try to speak up. So before we begin, just pause for a moment. Close your eyes and picture something you've been clinging to lately. Maybe an opinion, a worry, memory, or even your phone screen. Notice how real that clinging feels. Now imagine watching it dissolve, like writing in sand as a wave rolls in. You can still recall it, but it's no longer gripping you. Now bring to mind the idea of identity. The me that scrolls through the world on a daily basis, reacts, plans, worries, and dreams. Notice how this me feels so solid and continuous, yet is always shifting.
Speak up.
Thought by thought, mood by mood. As you breathe, quietly reflect. If everything I experience, including this very sense of me, arises in dependence on causes, conditions, and perception, what might it mean for me to see myself more lightly and with more fluidity? So kind of let these thoughts shape the mind as we go forward, and let the mind be prepared for the following insights that Nagarjuna is going to be presenting us in this section of the text. So we'll start at verse 101. We're now, by the way, we are now on a new chapter in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. We completed 2 weeks ago, or last week maybe, 2 weeks ago I think, we completed the first chapter, which was, I forget what it was even called, but this chapter is now called Delving into the Profound. So we're actually really going kind of deep into the profound teachings on emptiness. Not that we weren't, but we're now delving into it in a deeper way. So today's session, I'm naming it Seeing Through the Self, and it's the wisdom beyond all extremes. And this has to do with the middle way of Buddhism, of Mahayana Buddhism. And if you look at the Merriam-Webster definition of middle, it's the midpoint between extremes. So it's exactly what Mahayana Buddhism is talking about when they're talking about the middle way. It's the midpoint between extremes. And so we're going to get into this. So here's verse 101. Just as when a banana tree with all its parts is torn apart, there is nothing. So when a person having the 6 constituents is divided, it is the same. And we talked about the 6 constituents in the previous classes. It talks about the 4, we're made of the 4 elements. So the body is, earth, air, wind, fire, water, and then there's space, and then there's consciousness. So a person is made up of all of these elements, as is just about everything. Even non-conscious, they have the 4 elements. So it was talking about a banana tree here. And if you take apart if you sort of peel apart the banana tree and you're looking for a core to it, you're not going to find one. There are layers and layers that you just keep peeling away. Then you get to what's called a pseudostem, which is just more leaves wrapped around one another, which connect down to a root. So the core of the banana tree is not solid. That's the point Nagarjuna is making. So most trees hide a sturdy trunk within. But Nagarjuna uses to show that what we call a person is also just layers. Body, mind, memories, perceptions, habits. So when we're talking about the mental continuum is where all of these habits reside, where all of these repetitive emotions that we keep having, they reside in this mental continuum, but it's not solid. It's not solid. It arises due to causes and conditions, but we just keep recreating those causes and conditions, re-energizing all of that. And Nagarjuna is pointing this out to us, that the way we actually exist is not this solid thing, but just these layers and layers of pieces that make up what we call the person. And none of those things, the thoughts, the memories, the feelings, the emotions, none of those things are the self on their own. That is not the self. We would consider those to be aspects of the self. So, here's an example that AI gave, which I thought was pretty interesting. He says it's like searching your smartphone for the internet. You'll find chips, you'll find circuits, you'll find a screen, you won't find anything called internet. You will not find that. But it works dependently on all of those parts and the network between those parts. So the person is the same, dependently functioning, but not independently existing. It seems like a simple, logical thing, but we don't feel that way when we think about ourselves. We feel me very solidly, and we're very attached to me and very attached to mine. So when we're thinking, here's a good one. When we're thinking about me, this me, what is it that we're pointing to exactly? What is me? Is me the body? Is me the mind? Is me the memories? Is me all of the habits? Exactly what is me? We need to pinpoint that. And one of the things that happens is when I do this, I find I'll go, well, I'm not my mind. I'm not my body. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. So I keep saying my, as if there's a me somewhere that's owning all of this. My family, my wife, my kids, my pets, and anything that's me or mine, I'm very attached to. In some way, very attached to. So what that's pointing to is that this is just really kind of an idea we have. It's almost like, can I find this? Can I actually find this me anywhere? It's so almost like this phantom thing. My mind, my body, my senses, my emotions, my everything. Where's the actual me? It's sort of like it's almost like a convenient label for everything that makes up what we call the person. But it's very difficult to find. I mean, anybody have any other thoughts on that? I mean, Does anybody think they can actually pinpoint what me is when you're looking for me?
I mean, some of it is probably context dependent. You feel it like yourself. Like I say, I walk, and that's sort of my body present. But I would say inside.
Right.
I think it's my mind, but I mean, a label doesn't have to exist for it's more convenient categorization, so that we can talk about shit.
Exactly. Actually, that's really good. It's a label that's very convenient and it functions. The problem that arises is that we get very attached to me. We get so attached to this me. It sort of encompasses everything about our experience. And so if somebody criticizes me or criticizes mine, we have a bad reaction to that. And then that causes relationship problems, it causes arguing, it causes fighting, it causes ultimately wars, all kinds of problems, because we are clinging to this idea, which actually is just a functional label. It works. It works. It's rather than going about saying, the mind is thinking a thought now, the voice, the tongue is moving and speaking words now. We just go, I'm doing this, me, mine. But the problem Buddhism is saying is that we get wrapped up as if this me thing is an actual, real, solid thing that we're clinging to and defending and get all upset about. And this is kind of huge, because this is where all the problems arise in this samsaric kind of existence. Clinging to me, grasping at me. What we would call ego. This kind of ego arises out of this very convenient label, me. And then all the trouble starts. So if we actually were to stop thinking of ourselves as feeling so solidly existent, if we actually began to think of ourselves more like a layered being, that the me is just a very convenient label for how all of this functions, how might that affect the way we have relationships with others? All kinds of others. What would that do? If we are able to get to the point where we just see that the me is, like Claudia was saying, it's sort of like a label for all of these things. It's convenient to use. You'd have to talk in so many different terms to get across just saying I'm walking. But the fact that we take it on board as being the solid thing, if we could let go of that for ourselves, see ourselves more like, this layered, like the banana tree self, right? If we could think that way, wouldn't that affect the way we thought about others? I think that's what we do. I think from what we feel within is how we project out onto everything that seems to be outside of us. And I think if we were able to change the way we are grasping and so attached to this idea of me, see it as a label, see it as a convenient, functioning way to do things, and we were able to look upon all others that way, I think it would change the way we relate to one another, or that we would relate to them. I mean, there's always in Buddhism, always in these teachings, there is a beneficial aspects to them. There's a reason why the Buddha would have been teaching this. A reason why Nagarjuna is talking about this. It's for benefit. It's so that our experience will be better. Our relationships will be better. If we understand ourselves and how we are put together, if we understand that more clearly, we are going to have better relationships with others. We're not going to be triggered in the same way that we are now. Okay. Any comments or questions about that particular idea?
I like the functional me.
The functional me.
The functional I. rather than, me. It's just, this is, I understand. It's the functional, it's like ultimate and, relative. It just adds another layer. It's the functional.
The functional me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of a way to, if we could let go of the grasp of me so much and just loosen it up a bit, I think we could start to experiment with that. But we're so tied up in our ego and our emotions, and it's huge. It's huge. Anyway, I will go on to the next verse. Verse 102. Therefore, the conquerors said, all phenomena are selfless. Since this is so, all 6 constituents have been shown to be selfless for you. So basically what that's saying is the Buddhas declared that everything, body, feeling, perception, mental conditioning, consciousness, and all of the elements, lack a separate individual self. All of those things lack a self. So here's the commentary on that. Everything we can point to depends on something else to exist. And if you just look around, this will prove itself to you. There is no denying this. This is logical. Everything we can point to depends on something else to exist. Nothing stands alone. That interdependence is what Buddhists mean by selfless. They don't stand alone. They are, everything depends on actually everything else to exist. So this is not, selflessness is not something that's self-negating or fatalistic. It's actually freeing. It frees us from this clinging and this grasping and this attachment that we have that causes all these problems. When we stop defending a fixed me, compassion will naturally expand, because the line between me and you is not as solid as it seems to be. So here's a thought, how, if we saw ourselves as not existing as solidly as we seem to be, if we saw ourselves as being an interdependent being and connected with everything else, how would that change how we behave when we are in an argument with someone?
What would be really helpful is if there was something we could perceive with our current set of sense faculties, that, like, when we engaged in an action, we could see what it was doing. Like when you put your hand in a puddle and you can swish around and you can see the leaves and stuff, right? You can see the mud and the leaves. I mean, if we had the capacity to see it, it might be really helpful.
You're trying to see are you trying to see emptiness, or you're trying to see?
No. I mean, to see when I say, let's just say, if I think a kind, loving thought about you, if I could see some kind of energy, if I could see some kind of energetic ripple, and then see how it transforms you, and
Well, I think
you can see the impact of this interconnected thing.
if you just not think the thought, but you act out the thought, then you will probably likely see a positive result from acting out that thought, right? I mean, if you're compassionate, caring,
Right.
and other people, benefit from that, they thank you, you benefit from that. So, that's not enough proof that?
That is actually enough proof.
It is.
Yeah.
It's yeah. This is. I don't know.
I want to see the waves of the
It has to more to, I mean, like, all of us feel in our own ways somewhat frustrated by our lack of power over the environment that we find ourselves in, whether it's, a work environment, or your wife has passed away and left you with all this stuff to deal with, or a political environment, or, all these things we get, and it can feel a little bit like the things we do don't have an impact on these environments. Or
Well, I think
I don't
that's
know.
not-
I'm not. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you have to be careful, I think, because each one of us controls basically our own destiny from the Buddhist point of view, based upon our, actions over many lifetimes and our habituations and our karma. And so for any event to happen to any single individual or any single being, that has to be looked at from the context of their own past lives, their own karma, their own habituations. And you have to see it in that sense rather than saying, oh, it's somehow related to an action I may have taken. Now, maybe it is. But I think, when I think of Tracy, I think, she didn't make a choice to actively get hit by lightning. It happened. It happened largely, if you believe the Buddhist philosophy, because, the causes and conditions came together for whatever reason, based upon her, who she is, what she's done, her past lives, her karma, and where she needs to go. And so, even though there are consequences to that are practical or challenging or difficult, I think if you see it that way, you just have to say, well, these things happen, and all you can do is the best you can do while you're here. And what do you say? Don't help somebody if you can, and don't harm if you can't, and just live that way, and you'll get rewarded while you're here. Problem is, we don't know if we're going to be going anywhere else. Everybody tells us we are, but the proof is in the pudding is not there. That's the challenge.
Well, so that goes back to Kavita's point, really. So the challenge is to find out now, while we're here, how can we change in the way we act, the way we speak, the way we think about things? Can we change our relations with others?
Yes,
and,
you can.
and of course, yes. But we have to want to do it, and we have to be willing to look at, really, these teachings help quite a bit because they break down what we just sort of seem to instinctively feel as me, this solid thing, and our society plays off of this in such a strong and dramatic way, and it can be devastatingly cruel and harmful when it gets to its, gets the really bad aspects of this ego. And so it's really important for us to look at these teachings and to think about how we can change. We start with ourselves. We have to change ourselves. And then how are we going to change how we relate to others? Because invariably we're going to get into arguments with people. There will be triggers. Are we able, when we're in an argument with somebody, to just loosen up, step back, and go, wait a minute, I don't need to be so engaged or triggered by this. I can just relax. And in that relaxing, that could help relax the whole argument and give some space for the person who's so triggered to calm down. But if we just keep escalating it, we know exactly where it goes. Sometimes it leads to physical violence. Even in families. Maybe not even, just it does. Yeah. So this is very beneficial information for us in terms of relationships. Because relationships are very important to us. We are not actually isolated. If you go back to the idea that everything depends on something else to exist, and this is not just one other thing that it depends on. If you really trace it, it depends on everything. So that goes the same for us. So we want our relationships are important to us. It matters. because that's how things exist. We want to have good relationships. So if we want that, we need to start thinking about how we think about this me and how we react to particular triggers. And what we can do to change that, to let go of it, to loosen up a little bit. Yeah. So if we could think of this idea of selflessness or emptiness, selflessness, as not being any kind of a negation, but in actuality, it's a connection. Because we don't have this solid, inherently fixed existing self, we actually can connect with one another. We can change the way we think about ourselves. We are not fixed. We can change anything, but most of all, that change is going to occur in how we think about someone, or how we think about ourselves, or how we think about a particular problem. We can change the way we think about it.
This is going to sound snarky in a certain way, but we are talking about this, and it's still very me oriented. We're talking about how I'm going to experience different, and it's going to change my relationship, and my karma, and my this, my that. It's like,
yeah,
sort of ironic.
It is ironic, but that's where we're coming from. That's where we start. That's what samsara is the land of ego grasping. I shouldn't even say the land, the realm, or the realm of ego grasping. So this is what we're working against. The solid me. This is where all of us are starting. So this is where we have to work.
I mean, in a way, when we talk about this stuff, especially, people or situations, it's as if we're standing on solid ground on the edge of the ocean, and we've got our footing, and we're solid, and and we're waiting for the rest of the ocean to work itself out and then get back to us, when in fact we're just tumbling infinitely along with all of it. But we have a sense like we're somehow standing there on our solid ground while the rest of the chaos, or the rest of the things around us are in motion.
Well, in the construct that we live in this country, and how we grow up, yeah, we're here because we do have issues, and they have given us the incentive. They pushed us.
So
and
this is
given us
coming
the
from India.
enthusiasm.
They have the same issues in India.
In parts, I'm sure, but what
And
about
otherwise
Dharamsala?
this philosophy wouldn't exist the way it does for us.
Well, I think that it basically is a way of life, and it affects everybody. It kind of lands where it's supposed to, on who is hearing it. Not just like, oh, this only means this for you. It's sort of like it just molds over you, and it becomes what you need.
It's the same problem everywhere. It's grasping. It's the same problem in ancient India as it is today in modern America.
Here's a thought. Many years ago in some yogic study, I don't remember who it was, but they talked about, I read this wonderful book about how humans we're a transitional being, we're always evolving. And all this discussion reminds me of, it's like our form really kind of dictates, we have, our vision is that we're separate, and we hear things from our form gives us the experience of separateness. And yet we know, because of dependent origination or dependent arising thoughts, it's all interrelated with thoughts. So as we come to realize, like not just little groups of people realizing that we are not separate because we're all humans as a species, that our form begins to change. And we can't will it, but just as our perceptions change, because like Kavita was saying, what if we could see, how one action causes a ripple? And there are people that probably can, see that, but most of us can't. So it's just where my mind goes to, where it seems to be such a struggle because of the form that we're residing in, And if we can give it some porousness, like what Christopher's talking about, like in the Maha Mudra practices, where we kind of relax even the concept of the form, it allows some of those changes to occur, if that makes sense.
Sure it does. I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking of some of these yogis, and in particular, we've been reading this book about Lama Yeshe in his life, and he clearly was a yogi, and clearly he had, I would say, extrasensory powers that most of us do not have. And this comes through, this book is written by all various people who were in contact hundreds of people and their experiences. That's what makes the book so compelling to read. It's not just one person talking about their experience with Lama Yeshe. It's all of these people, hundreds of people describing similar things over and over and over. So what it shows for us in our modern era, not in ancient times, not in the ancient Shakyamuni Buddha, but in our modern era, there do exist these kinds of people who can sort of transcend what we think of the normal boundaries that we're limited to, and be of huge benefit. I mean, he was of huge benefit. He and Lama Zopa and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as a trio, brought the Dharma to the West in the biggest way we've seen ever. It just wasn't here before. It just was not here. And now, look at us. And it's due to these amazing individuals who had this clarity and ability to work with people the way that was appropriate for them. I mean, this is all I can say. When I read these stories about Lama Yeshe, he could be the sweetest, most wonderful, loving, mothering kind of guy, and he could be the most fierce, harsh, taskmaster. It all depended on who he was dealing with and what was going to be the best way to connect with them and get some change to happen. It was amazing. It's amazing. And these people's stories, bar none, even when he was this wrathful, awful person to them, they never felt like he was being mean. They always knew that it was for their benefit. And we're incredibly grateful. I mean, Rabina, there's a section in there which basically she says, he said I was fat, He said I was, and I said, I'm too opinionated. And look at the impact Robina has had on the Western world in terms of the Dharma. She travels constantly. She is by far, when surveys have been done and they have, the question has been asked, who has been the most, influential, who introduced you to the Dharma and really made it have meaning for you? And her name is at the top of the list, And I even have to say, when Kabir and I were first listening, we were trying to find some other thing to listen to on the radio while we were working or on the internet, podcasts and stuff. And we'd gone through the BBC comedies, and that was all great and wonderful, but it was getting old. And we found this podcast that had something to do with Lama and Buddhism. And there was this woman on there who was just so fast and quick and intense. And yet what she was saying psychologically was so meaningful, so potent, And that was like, she is the living lineage of Lama Yeshe. And that's the connection. And it was after that we then found, Lama Pasam, then found Geshe Dragpa, then found Geshe Nima. But it started with Rabina and that connection. And it wasn't always sweet, kind, and gentle. She's not that way. Anyway.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby. So let's move on to verse 103. Thus, neither self nor non-self are to be apprehended as real. Therefore, the great subduer rejected views of self and non-self. So, in other words, the Buddha said, don't cling to I exist. But he also said, don't cling to I don't exist either. Because what we do normally, naturally, we think inherently, I inherently exist. I inherently don't exist. He said, don't cling to either of those. Let go of those.
I was telling Christopher that lately I've been trying to use the metaphor of a song, which I may have mentioned last week. So just like Lennon and McCartney, say Paul McCartney wrote many songs, my consciousness has many lifetimes, expressions of that consciousness. And so the me that we all think of, the Kovita that tends to be the me that we're talking about. It's the Kovita, the Don, the body and so forth. If I've been finding it helpful to go, but yeah, I did mention this last week, oh, okay, so at some point this song called Kovita will be over and it'll be completely natural and fine and good. And there are other songs that this consciousness has in the past composed and some in the future. And those songs, I don't know, I'm just finding it to be helpful.
Well, in many cases, those songs continue to live on and have an effect. For instance, if the teachings of the Buddha or the teachings of Lama Yeshe, they continue to have an effect. When I've been reading this book on Lama Yeshe's life, it's as if Lama Yeshe is leaping right off of the pages of the book and into my heart and mind. So it's not as if there is not still an effect occurring from Lama Yeshe's teachings. It's very similar to what Kavita says. We can listen to a song, the songwriter is long gone, the singer is long gone, but that song will still move us. It still is alive. It still has an effect. And our lives are that way. Kavita's right. How we live our lives will continue to have an effect long after we're gone, really. In many, many different ways. And that's another thing to think about. That this is what we are, in our mind streams, we are creating. What song do we want to create? What energy, what kind of life, what kind of message or feeling do we want to generate with who we are in our relationships with everyone we come into contact to, not just other people, but animals, insects, every living being.
Kind of getting into this Lama Yeshe business because it relates to what we're reading about selflessness and emptiness and impermanence and dependent arising. It's like totally, you have this sense that he was surfing, the vibes because he was, again, hundreds of stories of him, people recounting their individual stories of him just showing up out of nowhere at exactly the right moment when they needed to hear something. And then he would, smile and laugh and walk off. I'm talking unexpectedly showing up wherever they were. Time and time again, that experience happened. Him walking up, somebody was in the back of the room, hundreds of these stories where they were thinking about something. And he would, after the teaching, just go walk up to them and start conversing about what they had been thinking about. They hadn't articulated it to anyone. They were just in the back of the room thinking.
Right.
Just time and time again. There's in the books, it's 2 volumes, so there's at least 3 documented by the people that were at these events of him literally changing the weather. Him saying, do you want me to give a teaching or do you want me to change the weather? Because I only have the bandwidth to do one of those for you this morning. So which would you rather have? Literally, and you just kind of have to, healings also, many, many reports of just, not big dramatic, you are healed, but he just would happen to touch them and suddenly this or that thing, was the remedy just arose.
Yeah, so they are modern day stories.
It's kind of helpful to read this stuff because it basically points at this space in between the concrete way we see and experience things. There's some other space in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I guess just to add, in terms of those of us that see ourselves as disciples of Geshe Nema, I was speaking with him a few weeks ago, And he recommended, he said, it would be probably helpful to read some stories about some of the holy beings. He was talking about the Nalanda masters. And I did. I started reading the Jakata tales, but what happened during that same time period was when we ran across the Lama Yeshe, started reading the Lama Yeshe books. And I went, oh, this is a modern day version of these stories about realized beings. And for me, that was very helpful to see the cultural connection to this current song known as Kabila.
Yeah, yeah. And for many of us, these stories.
Obviously we would recommend it. Dawn's been listening to an audio version, I think.
Yeah.
Online.
But I think, it's part of it is it begins to point at, since we don't have highly realized lamas in our presence, like Geshe Nima lives at a monastery. He's always talking about the clairvoyant tantra, he has the experience of having personal contact with some of these beings who've done all these practices and are starting to see in between the cracks, and able to function within between the cracks.
It's very hopeful and very helpful.
And it's not, it's not like I'm out to, and I think none of us are in this to acquire extra superpowers or anything. It's not that. It's just that they're evidence of, okay, perception shift is real, and here's what starts to happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. That's my impression.
So back to
harping on it. Sorry about
back to the Buddha saying, don't cling to I exist and don't cling to I don't exist either. So we're going back to this idea. Buddha's telling us about two traps that we need to avoid. We have to avoid believing in an eternal self and believing in total nothingness. Because if we think I exist, normally we think I exist inherently. I'm real. I exist as a fixed me. And then when we're told I don't exist, we go, oh, well, I'm nothing. It's just nihilism. Nothing. I die. I'm gone. It's over. Period. Lights out. And the Buddha is saying both of those are mistaken views, and we should not cling to those. So the example here is a very good example. Is if you think of a rainbow and you try to grab a rainbow. We all know this. We probably even as kids tried to, hold a hose. The sun comes through it. We see the rainbow and we try to grab it. Well, our hands go right through it. We cannot grasp it, and yet we cannot deny that it's there. We see it. It is functioning. We see the colors, the bands of color. So it's sort of like that. It's the self is similar to that these things are coming together, causes and conditions are coming together to create an appearance, and yet you cannot grab it. You cannot grasp it and hold on to it. And when we try to do that, that's where we fall into this trap of thinking things inherently exist, or thinking if they don't inherently exist, then it's nihilism. It doesn't exist at all. And the Buddha's saying, no. It does exist, it functions, but it just doesn't function. It's not, you can't grab it inherently the way you think. And so the rainbow becomes a very a potent example of that kind of thing that we all can relate to. We all have had the experience of that, of seeing that, and realizing that it's very fleeting. We cannot grasp onto it, and yet it truly appears. We cannot deny it. So this comes down to, when we're thinking about how we feel about ourselves, we can often get caught between these two views of ourselves, where we go, I'm really someone special. I am special. I'm special. I'm different. I'm special. Or we'll go, I'm nobody. I'm nothing. I don't matter at all. So we can get into this very puffed up view of ourselves and think that it's the way I am. I'm special. Or we can get into this very deflated view of ourselves and go, oh, God, just shoot me now, And the Buddha's saying that's a mistake. That is a mistaken view. And we need to avoid that. We need to understand the way we actually exist, which is neither of those two extremes. But we do get caught in that trap. We all know this. We've all experienced this to varying degrees. You know, I've experienced myself both go, oh yeah, I'm puffed up, I can do this, I can do that. And then I've also experienced, oh my God, I'm a loser. Totally.
Fall into depression.
Yes.
And it seems real.
It seems very real. And people will take it all the way and keep going and going and going. And we're being cautioned to not do that.
It's also very Western. Grow up if you're special. I mean, that's what kids get told.
Yeah. We're conditioned to think, you know, I'm special, I'm special. You know, everyone is a snowflake, right? And true, we are all different. But a snowflake is also very, very temporary. It appears, it's sort of like a rainbow. It appears, but then you can't grasp it, you know. And that's more the way we should be looking at ourselves. Not grasping onto it, because the grasping is the problem. Okay, let's go on to the next verses. Verses 104 and 105 together. And this is a really important verse. And Brian, listen up. Because this is going back to a question you've had before. So it's sort of revisiting the same question. Sights, sounds, and so forth were said by the subduer not to be true and not to be false. If from one position its opposite arises, both do not exist in fact. The Buddha said that what we see and hear is neither completely real nor completely fake. Nagarjuna is addressing one of the Buddha's more subtle teachings, and this is very subtle, and we have to listen up. The way our sensory world appears to us, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and the thoughts we experience in our minds. None of these are truly existent or truly non-existent. At first glance, that might seem contradictory, but the Buddha is steering us away from two mistaken extremes. When we say something is truly existent, we mean it exists independently and from its own side. That's what truly existent in Buddhism. When it says truly existent, it exists independently from its own side. It's not a dependent horizon. And it has its own solid core of realness. But when we examine our experiences carefully, nothing meets that description. Everything we encounter depends on causes and conditions. Eyes require light to see. Sounds require vibration, ears, and attention. Thoughts arise from memory, language, and many influences. So to call our experiences ultimately true is an exaggeration. They are not independent experiences. They are co-arising. However, saying everything is completely false is a mistake too. We do see colors. We do hear music. We do smell coffee. We do feel joy. We do stub our toe. Our experiences function. They have effects and they matter. So they can't be dismissed as if nothing is happening at all. Nagarjuna is pointing to what's called the middle way. What we experience is neither solidly real nor utterly non-existent. It appears vividly, but it doesn't exist the way it seems to be. It's like the rainbow, beautiful and present, but lacking independent substance. He then addresses a common trap we have. When people reject true existence, they sometimes assume that non-existence must therefore be truly existent. If things don't truly exist, then non-existence must be true. We just jump from, going to one thing to existing inherently to another thing. When you claim something is truly real, when we claim something is truly real, we automatically generate the idea of what is truly unreal. We may not think this way, but this is what occurs. The same holds true for all pairs of opposites. If I say subject, automatically object arises. If I say up, automatically down. If I say tall, automatically short. These opposites arise together. They are mutually dependent. One cannot exist in a vacuum. One of those cannot exist in a vacuum. The only way we understand what short is in relation to tall. Otherwise, short in a vacuum has no shortness at all. Tall in a vacuum has no tallness at all. Everything is like this. This is far more subtle than we actually think. If one collapses, so does the other. They arise together. They are mutually defining concepts. Because each position depends on its opposite to make sense, neither can stand on its own. They're like two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without implying the other. So the concept of non-existence only makes sense in contrast to existence. When one collapses, so does the other. They are co-created ideas. You can't hold on to one after you've let go of the other. That's what Buddha means when he says both do not exist in fact. They do not truly inherently exist from their own side. Ultimate reality cannot be captured in a simple yes and no answer. From this perspective, the Buddha doesn't claim that the world really exists in a solid, absolute way, nor does he claim that it does not exist as if nothing is there at all. It's like a complete illusion. The world is beyond truth and falsity as we typically frame them, because those categories depend on assumptions of fixed, inherent existence. Instead, the world exists dependently through relationships, conditions, language, perception, and causes. Things are real enough to live with, but not real enough to cling on to. This insight matters a lot. Because when we stop grasping as if everything were fixed and permanent, we suffer less. And when we stop denying our experience altogether, we stay engaged, we stay compassionate, we stay connected and awake to the world, rather than just turning our back on it. So, Nagarjuna is pointing us to a freedom that rests in this balance. Not solid, but not non-existent, dependently arising, fluid, and workable. If things were inherently existent, if they were fixed, they couldn't be workable. If we were inherently existent and fixed, we couldn't change. We'd just be stuck with who we are, the way we are, behaving the way we do, and thinking the way we do. And that's not actually what's going on. We can change. Nothing is fixed. We can change because we are fluid. We're not inherently existent. This is important to our relationships and to how we think about ourselves. You know, especially if we are down on ourselves and think, oh God, I'm horrible, I can't change, this is just the way I am. Well, no, you can change the way you think about who you are and how you are. You don't have to buy into what society says. You don't. It's up to you. It's up to your thinking. And this is huge. I mean, think of all the suffering all of us have done because we think we're fixed in a certain way. You know, we're a particular, I don't know what you want, a particular species, a particular color, a particular sex, a particular whatever. And we think we're stuck and we don't, something's wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. We just change the way we think about it. We can be more fluid with ourselves and with others. It's quite possible. So, you know, I mean, have you ever had the experience where you thought you were right about something, really right about something, and you found out that you were wrong, and that experience was actually liberating? You know, it's like, wow, what a relief. I thought things were this way, and I've been mistaken. What a relief. I mean, I can think of examples from myself, even that I think everybody would relate to. For years, Kavita and I were, this was, you know, after the 2000s started and 9/11 and all of that, for years we were like addicted, fixed, watching the news. And we were believing what we were seeing and going, oh my God, oh my God. And we grew up with a particular outlook, which I would say was very, very liberal outlook. I just grew up in Massachusetts. My parents were liberal. I was in that liberal bubble. I didn't have anything against conservatives. It's just how I was. I was liberal. We came to Texas and found, there are other kinds of people. They're not just liberal. Well, some of our closest and dearest and long-term friends, I'm thinking of the people who were in our musical group, who we were with one another all the time. We traveled with one another. Well, most of them were conservative. And yet they were artists, they were musicians, we could talk about anything, they loved their family, they had interracial marriages, some were bisexual, some were homosexual, and it was fine. They were conservatives, which was blowing the lid on the whole, oh, wow, you know, conservatives must be really, you know, they must be white racists. Blew the lid off of that. So what happened was, we're watching the news and thinking, oh, we thought this was so. This and this is so. This is so. And yet they're always saying, well, you know, it's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. You watch. When we get down to the nitty gritty and find all the dirt on so and so, everything's gonna be okay. And it never happens. It never happens. They just keep leading along everybody. Like, oh well, in 2 weeks' time, there's gonna be a change. You're gonna see it. You're gonna see it. And it wasn't happening. And finally, we went, to hell with it. I'm not going to buy into this. I'm not going to buy into this, you know, this divisive thing that's being created. So Kavita then started looking at the opposite news, the non-liberal, and finding that they're doing the exact same things. They're saying it's all going to get better. Just wait. We've got the dirt on so and so. Just wait about a couple of weeks and we're
It
there.
always is 2 weeks.
You know,
Biden's gonna get arrested or Trump's gonna get arrested in 2 weeks.
and so what happened?
You find that every day.
What happened to me in this, and this was a period of maybe 10 years, maybe more. What happened to me is it's sort of like, I just let go of the whole paradigm. The whole paradigm of this divisive opposite, because I knew it wasn't true. I knew from the people I was close to that it wasn't true. So I just let go of it. And by letting go of it, so much more relaxed. I can be in any group of people and be fine. It doesn't matter what they say. It does not trigger me. What I'm more interested in is, can we be happy together? Can we relate together? And I don't care what their beliefs are. And so that was an instance where finding out that I was wrong about a fixed belief was such a relief. And I think all of us can relate to this because we're all dealing with a very similar thing going on right now in our society.
Yeah, people typically don't take the relaxed approach. They just take the extreme approach.
Right. And that's being fueled by media.
Very antagonistic.
Yeah. So I just stopped. I just stopped watching it, and it feels so much better. I'm focusing on Dharma. I mean, all along we were always practicing and studying Dharma. So that helped greatly, you know, in being able to change like that.
Well, it kept you open you
Yeah.
know, and then you realize that a lot of what's being said is not helpful. And,
Molly.
you know,
Mhm.
so the divisive speech, the things that go on, even if you have a politician who you admire, and then they're always saying things that you have to finally admit that this is not helpful.
Right.
And so my only thing I can do is just to back away and to not,
Mhm.
you know, not even give my opinion, because I don't, obviously my opinions were not helping me either, you know, so.
So I just found actually backing away was a relief.
Yeah, it is.
I think
No need to be right or wrong.
we all struggle with this. It's very. We all struggle with this thing about having the conviction that the information that we've taken in is correct and accurate, and it's really hard to realize that regardless of the source of the information, that whatever your personal senses or leanings or your understanding of what's being said and done, that everybody is operating on an imperfect, with an imperfect understanding of deliberately fashioned storylines.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean,
Mhm. Yeah.
so even at even in the most benign, ways, no matter what, somebody has to decide what is the headline going to say and how is the story going to read. You know, and
Yeah.
in so doing, as we know, reality is this diverse, broad thing, and no matter when you say the quick brown fox jumped over the fence, you know, you've established something.
Yeah.
And once that's established in a certain way, you know, the fox is brown and it's quick.
Yeah.
And that's
And when you listen to enough of that stuff, even though there are things that are said that are demeaning and basically mean spirited, not with the intention, but so someone's being hurt. When you listen to that enough, it either hurts you or you're becoming complicit in a way, you know,
right,
with what's going on. And again, the best thing is to just back away slowly, and
you know, I think
so you can
I
keep
think
your
the
perspective.
best attitude right now is to stay out of it. One of these emails we got from the Kadampa Center, which is a Buddha center, the guy said, "Don't spend your time." The monk who's the geshe there just said, "Don't spend your time on this stuff."
Yeah, I mean, even
Just
Lama
don't spend
Yeshe,
your time on it.
Yeah.
at the time when Lama Yeshe was around in the 70s and 80s,
Oh yeah. Well,
TV was the big thing. TV. And basically he said, you realize when you watch TV, what you're doing to your mental continuum.
Yeah.
Though your mental continuum is taking everything in and it's storing it. And it's remembering it. And it's going to come out in some way. And he says, you be very careful what you fill your mind with.
The thing is, I want to just, I mean, I'm just saying this for myself. We all think we're very smart and know how to watch the true, correct, right thing.
Oh.
I'm not.
And, you know,
I admit it.
that's why I found that so funny and shocking when I literally heard conspiracy right-wingers and conspiracy left-wingers were literally saying the same thing. In 2 weeks, Biden's going to get arrested. In 2 weeks, Trump is going to get arrested. And all their followers are going, "Oh, yay, finally, finally." And you just kind of go, wow.
Anyway, that, you know, I knew that would be a discussion we could all relate to. So I want to continue so we can get through as much as possible. Verse 106, knowing that these in all ways do not exist, how could the all-knower say they have limits or no limits, have both or neither? Since the world doesn't exist the way we imagine it does, how could the Buddha declare it to have an end or not? So here's what this situation is talking about. When asked whether the world or the self has an end, and this is why this relates to Brian, because we had this same question come up, and Brian said, well, why didn't the Buddha just say it, right? When asked whether the world or the self has an end, Buddha stayed silent. Not to withhold truth, but because the question itself was built on the wrong assumption that the, quote, world inherently exists. And we still, most of us, even despite science, still have that feeling about everything, that it inherently exists. We haven't let go of that. We haven't seen the fluidity of everything, the changeable nature of everything, the dependently arising, interconnected nature of everything. We're still a little bit locked into things are the way they appear to be. So this reason he didn't answer, the answer would have been like replying to the question, is the color of a dream solid or liquid? It was the wrong question. The analogy of a flame and a shadow capture this. So if you say, how long or short is a flame's shadow? That's the wrong way of actually approaching it, because the shadow depends entirely on light and surface, and not on the flame itself. It depends on so many things. So the shadow itself, can you say that's an inherently existing shadow? No. Is that shadow long or short? Well, it all depends. What's long, what's short? It's all relative. And the shadow itself is depending on your eyes, the light, the length, the surface that it's on. It's not an inherently existing thing. Neither is the world. Neither is the world. And this is why the Buddha would not answer the question, because the questioners were posing the question as if the inherently existing world, and this is in ancient India, is this going to end? And if Buddha said, yeah, it's going to end, then they go, oh, well, inherently existing world will end. Will the self end? And he said, oh yeah, the self will end. They go, oh, well, an inherently existing self will end. But if he answered, no, the world will not end, there will be a continuation, they'd go, oh, this inherently existing thing is going to go on forever. And if he said the same thing about the self, that it will continue on, they would go, oh, the inherently existing self will continue on. And it would be the wrong idea, and it would mislead the listeners. So he remained silent. The Buddha's silence was actually an act of compassion, a refusal to strengthen false views that would have harmed his listeners. So this can also go back to the other discussion we had. What kind of questions in our own lives come from false assumptions that we have? Like, if we expect that there should be some kind of lasting certainty in this world, should we expect that? Lasting certainty. Or is that a false assumption? Is it a false assumption to think, well, just get the right people in government and the whole thing's going to be fixed. Peace on earth, goodwill toward everybody, no wars, no nothing.
Or
has that ever,
on a family level, parents are supposed to do the right thing. They're just young people in most cases. There's no training.
There are guidebooks.
And everybody just comes through the process with their best shot. Mm-hmm. But, I say this from the point of knowing many people now, older people in their 40s and 50s, talking about their parents and why they're dealing with neurotic tendencies due to their childhood experiences. And you realize, wow, the assumption here is that somehow the parent is going to be smarter than you are.
And so we blame the parent, right?
Yeah, that's my point.
Which is...
So anyway, that's another one of those.
It's a lack of understanding.
Looking for something that isn't there.
Right.
Anyway,
So perhaps we're asking the wrong questions.
There are no stupid questions.
Amen.
Right.
That's what we say. There are no stupid questions.
No stupid questions.
At least they're asking.
Doesn't mean you always get answers.
Well, that's true. That's true. I still don't know why he picked, those few questions, not the answer, and the answer gave you 4,000 other ones. It's like, for those 4 were sort of 14 were so tough. Garland was so easy. I mean, that strikes me a little strange.
Well, all right. Let's go. Let's explore this a little further. Here's the next couple of verses. And basically what they say, I'll just go directly what these verses mean rather than read the verses. Somebody is asking a question of the Buddha here. It's related to the previous one. Buddhas beyond number appear across time, guiding countless beings toward awakening. Everything in the world is always ending, coming to an end, which does not cause the world to increase. Why then didn't the Buddha declare an end to the world? So here somebody is asking the Buddha a question based on a very common assumption. There have been countless Buddhas in the past. There are Buddhas now, and there will be more in the future. Each Buddha helps huge numbers of beings wake up and leave the cycle of suffering. Since there are more Buddhas showing people the path, and since no new sentient beings are being created, this is the Buddhist, shouldn't the total number of unenlightened beings eventually drop to zero? And this is the question that's being asked. Wouldn't that mean the cycle of rebirth must eventually end? If so, why doesn't the Buddha just say it? They imagine that over time, cyclic existence is slowly running out of beings. So cyclic existence is being seen as a place rather than a state of mind. This is the
either way,
inherent, right?
if you had a fixed,
Yeah. Why the Buddha didn't answer? The Buddha stays silent because the question is based on a mistaken idea that beings exist as solid, independent, permanent things. If he answered, yes, samsara ends, the person might think, that means an inherently existent person eventually disappears forever. And some people think that. And if he answered, no, samsara never ends, the person might think, that means an inherently existent person wanders forever in samsara. Either way, the person becomes more convinced that there's a fixed self moving through the universe. Silence prevents strengthening that wrong view. Here's what's actually true, according to the Buddha. There's no beginning to samsara or to sentient beings. But for every individual, samsara can come to an end. The mind has Buddha nature, the potential to become fully awakened. The stains that keep us trapped are temporary, not part of the mind's essence. The word they use is adventitious. The stains that exist in our mental continuum are not actually part of the mind itself, the nature of the mind. They are adventitious. When wisdom realizes emptiness, those stains can be removed. So each being will eventually awaken, even if they are suffering terribly right now. And here's why it hasn't already happened. Even though the Buddhas have been teaching forever, most beings, and just check this out for yourself, your feelings about this, most beings aren't open to the Dharma. They aren't in a suitable situation for study and practice. Most beings don't meet qualified teachers of the Dharma, or most beings simply have no interest. And even if good conditions arise, many beings ignore them. They don't grab them. They don't take advantage of them. So no Buddha can force enlightenment on anyone. Awakening is always a cooperation between outer guidance and inner readiness. That's why there's no moment when every single being suddenly becomes enlightened all at once. So a summary of these verses then. The questioner in the verse thinks like this: because beings become enlightened over time, samsara must eventually come to an end. But the Buddha sees that beings don't inherently exist. Progress depends on many conditions, and questions based on the idea of fixed identities create confusion. Samsara ends for individuals because the mind can awaken, but talking about a final end to samsara as a whole misunderstands what a being really is. Any thoughts about
Can you
that?
say that last question, that last sentence one more time, please?
Samsara ends for individuals because the mind can awaken. But talking about a final end to samsara as a whole misunderstands what a being really is. And so what's been said today is that a being really is a collection of causes and conditions, very fluid, very changeable, does not exist inherently. And as the being changes, as we change our mind, as we change our thoughts, we begin to see that we can change the person we are. We're not limited. And it can even go further than that. We can completely release ourselves from this mistaken view of self-grasping, which causes this samsaric mindset or this samsaric experience of ego grasping. That can change. But when you start talking about will samsara end, as if samsara itself is some inherently existing kind of thing, it's the wrong question. What can end is our mistaken view of who we are and what existence is. And that's why the Buddha did not answer those questions to the beings who were asking them with the thought that everything existed inherently, because even today too, in Buddha's time, in the Hindu religion, there was the strong belief in what was called an Atman, and that Atman existed inherently. It was a soul. It went from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, and that's who you are. And it never actually changes. It's an inherently existing thing. And if you were to say that has an end, then it would be like saying, I have an end, complete lights out, it's over, nothing. And that Buddha did not want to create that confusion in the mind. And so he remained silent, because they were posing the question in the wrong way, and they would have heard the response in a mistaken way as well. This is subtle. Yeah. So any where are we now? Oh, we're doing good. We have a minute. Any kind of closing thoughts anybody might have about how they feel about this and where we can go from here? Yeah.
Could you just, like, in one sentence, summarize to your best understanding of Nagarjuna's main point for us?
Yeah, the main point, I think, is that we are not fixed as beings. We're not these fixed individuals, that we are interconnected with everything. When we realize this can change the whole entire way we view what self and other is. When we understand that self and other arise, they're mutually dependent, they arise together, we begin to see, wow, there really isn't a line of difference between me and you in reality. And so I only want what's best for both of us. I mean, it changes our view. It was like this relief from letting go of watching the news, which is so divisive, and being able to be in any group of people now. I can be in any group of people, unless they're actually causing real harm to someone, then you want to stop that harm. But just in terms of opinions, it doesn't affect how I feel about the people. I don't go, oh, you're a bad person, I don't want to be in your sight. I don't feel that way. And so that's I think that's Nagarjuna's point. This is where we can go with this. We don't have to be locked into this, inherently existing me thing. We can expand. We can be fluid. We can realize that we are an appearance, and what song do we want to be? What do we want to express, and how do we want to engage with one another? And is it so important to have an opinion that's opposing? Or is it more important to be supportive, to be kind, to be generous, to be accepting, rather than rejecting? Give some space, for us to connect and enjoy one another. That's where I go when all of these emptiness teachings lead to better relationship.
Flexibility.
Flexibility. Yeah. So should we want to do a closing?
Somebody else.
Okay, well, we could just do, all right. May this precious, altruistic mind of bodhicitta, which is the mind of bodhicitta, Geshe Nima says, is unconditional love. This is love without conditions. May that mind arise and grow. May that precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but keep increasing. Keep increasing. May that unconditional love keep increasing. And may we always be connected to the teachers of the Dharma, the true Dharma, and keep following that path until we achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings who we are interconnected with. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. We will have to go past time.
Peace and love.
Thank you, everyone.
Unconditionally.
I appreciate all of you showing up and all of your, contributions, and
See you later, Lee.
and we will talk. I'll end the recording.
See ya.